Today we're talking about hunger in America, not the version people imagine from charity commercials or stereotypes, but the reality millions of families navigate quietly every day. Parents skipping meals, seniors rationing groceries, working families searching for food between paychecks.
Our guest is Kasumi Quinlan, co founder and CEO of Lemontree, a platform that has helped nearly 1 million families find food assistance through text message, WhatsApp, and the web. Lemontree was designed to meet people where they are without requiring smartphones, app downloads, or technical fluency. And it's increasingly being recognized not just as a food access tool, but as part of the public health infrastructure around food insecurity.
Kasumi, thank you so much for joining us today on the Invisible Americans podcast. What you've done already is truly incredible, and I have a feeling you are only starting out. So thanks so much for joining us and explaining how Lemon Tree actually gets food to people who actually need it, and in a very quick way.
Thank you. Thank you for
I
having me.
echo that. And I'm excited to have you and have this conversation. I'll tell you, when I moved to Los Angeles from New York, I was surprised that lemons grew on trees. If that tells you anything about
Yes.
growing up, but I certainly was surprised and delighted. You see, 1 million families almost have used Lemontree to find food. That is staggering. But I want to start more at the beginning. What problem were you trying to solve, and why wasn't it already being solved?
hmm So I think it makes sense to rewind a little bit, go back to 2020,
Yeah.
height of the COVID pandemic. And at the time, I was doing a lot of work in food justice in New York City, volunteering to deliver groceries to neighbors. And our team at Lemon Tree, we had wound down what we were doing to refocus on how could we best help in this moment. And we started coordinating volunteers for food pantries because demand for food assistance was incredibly high, but everybody was locked down at home. So how are the food pantries expected to distribute this food to all of these people who needed it without the help? So we started by matching volunteers to the food pantries in their neighborhoods that needed help. But through that process, we started to get this question of, can I take food home at the end of my shift? Or do I have to volunteer to get food? And we realized that for people who were looking for help with food, they didn't know how to get it. They were contacting this kind of back door to see if they could earn the food. And that brought our attention to this issue that the majority of people facing food insecurity don't access the free food that's already available to them. And meanwhile, there are more food pantries in the US than there are McDonald's. So why aren't people taking that help? That's the problem that we dove into and wanted to figure out how to solve.
Wait. That was an info bomb.
Yes.
More food pantries in America
Yes.
than McDonald's. Let that sink in, y'all. Can you just talk a little bit about how it works? No app download required, no smartphone needed. Talk about that. It seems like a deliberate design choice from day one to encourage accessibility.
David, definitely you hit that on the head. When we started digging into that problem, we realized that a huge barrier to families accessing these resources was just information, where if you went on Google, the pantry might not have a website or the schedule might change more than the website is updated. So we realized how important it was to keep that information accurate and make sure it was reaching families in a more proactive and user-friendly way. And so we started offering this text helpline, which actually originally was a phone helpline where people would kind of call a number that rang to my cell phone and I would do research and call them back a few hours later. And then that was great, but not super efficient. So
Wow.
as we grew, we figured out a better way to do things and realized that still the mobile phone was such a good access point for this. And that text messages, most people, over 90% of people who live under the poverty line have access to a cell phone. Not necessarily a smartphone. Many of them do because of the way the internet is ingrained in our culture nowadays. But we realized how accessible text messages were as a form of communication. So we really honed in on that to make sure we were meeting families where they're at.
So the ubiquitousness of the cell phone. I've been in African countries where there's nothing in sight, in the wilderness, and
Mhm.
everybody had a cell phone.
Yeah.
So I think that around the world, that this is a way to access it. But yeah, and I love the idea that this was your personal cell phone that people were calling, saying, "Where can I get?" And now you are this tremendous organization. We were looking at an article written about AI, and of how you are one of the AI heroes, so to speak, because you've been able to use AI for good, for food.
Mhm.
So talk to us about that connection and how that will help you grow this business that you have that is a tremendous nonprofit.
Thank you. Yeah, I mentioned, the first version being me answering the phone, moving to text messages, but that story of how do we scale and how do we use technology to scale this work because we know so many people need it. That's always been a driving force behind the work that we do. And so over the years, we've implemented more technology as we've grown, as operations have gotten more complicated, and AI is just a new chapter in that story. And so there's a few different places that we use it. On one hand, we use it to help personalize our resource recommendations for families where, not every family needs the same thing. They might not have the same schedule, they might not have the same dietary preferences, and they might prioritize distance over wait time or distance over food choice. And so, working with families to really make sure we're recommending something that matches their needs, we bring technology into that process so it's not just a human being that has to make that calculation in their head thousands of times a day. But then on the flip side, there's a lot of places we use it that are a little bit less perhaps exciting, but have the biggest impact. So back end operations, a huge area of work is the way that we keep our data updated. We are constantly bringing in different data sources across the internet, Facebook posts, feedback from our clients directly who have been there. And again, it's a lot of holding information at once, sorting through it. That's something that AI is really good at, just cleaning up those workflows so we can go faster and really stay responsive to the changes on the ground, which are increasing every day.
Yeah, I loved your answer to the question. I think it was, where is AI taking? Will it be your personality? Will it be you? And you said, no, 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 it's us. It's the humans
I,
that are still here.
I want to talk about government cheese. I grew up going to food banks for 12 plus years. And I think government cheese gets a bad rap. I think it's delicious, it's melty, comes in big bricks.
Mhm.
But one thing that
I'm
really
going to come
struck
check
me
out
about
your refrigerator right now, David. Are you sure? Are you sure?
Oh my gosh, I can't be the only one. But what I loved was there's space for that in your technology. So I don't think I was ever asked my opinion or information. And I think Lemontree includes honest community reviews from people who are using these resources. And I think
Mhm.
that's a very strategic and smart design choice. I'd love you to talk about it because I think this season we've talked a lot about dignity, and I
Mm.
think this is one of those things that to me speaks of dignity. But why did you do that? And what is your opinion on government cheese?
Well, I think pretty much all cheese is great cheese. Again,
So diplomatic, Kasumi. So diplomatic.
Kasui is keeping us on track, right, David? I know that this is your thing, the cheese thing, but go ahead.
but I think the question around sort of perceptions of what's given out at a food pantry is so core to the work that we do. And a lot of that was rooted in the early phone calls I was having where, I might tell somebody about a food pantry, but after we got off the phone, I didn't know if I had actually helped them or not. I didn't know if they had gone to the food pantry or what they had gotten. So I started calling back, or we started having conversations where I'd say, hey, just let me know, send me a text back, call me back, because the first conversations, it was a handful. So I was able to develop really personal relationships with some of those folks. And I saw that value right away of, okay, well, now we have that feedback loop. We can confirm that the food pantry is open. So I have confidence in the next conversation I have that this is going to help this person put food on the table. But then on the flip side, I have not just confidence in the information, but confident that it was a good experience where I could say to the next person, you can trust me on this because your neighbor went there and she got all of the fresh produce that she needed. She also got oil for cooking. She got seasonings. And those are things that a lot of folks don't expect to receive at a food pantry. They expect, mac and cheese, oatmeal, government cheese.
She ran back to cheese, Carol.
Exactly.
That's right. You mentioned the word neighbor. So you're in 11, you call them regions, but they seem to be the areas around big cities. How did you make those particular decisions of where you would start? Because I assume that your plan is the rest of the country.
Yes, I don't know if you have a crystal ball over there, Carol, but you're absolutely right. I mean, we started in New York City again. That's where I live, and that's where I was when our team started focusing on this helpline idea. And we saw in New York City, especially, it's a city with an abundance of resources. It's a city where on the same block you have billionaires and folks who don't have enough to put food on the table. And so you see that mismatch every single day. And I think New York, can be an extreme example, but that exists everywhere in the United States, and it's particularly concentrated in cities. And so when we saw this problem of the gap between resources available versus the people who need it, cities are a really natural environment where those factors are both present. So it makes sense to start there. But something interesting that we've learned in launching in other regions is that it's really hard to define a city, just from a technical perspective, where are those boundaries? And then human beings don't really fall into neat boundaries all of the time. So if you're right on the other side of the city boundary, but you commute into the city, or you're willing to drive 5 minutes to go to that food pantry, why wouldn't you be able to use Lemontree? So we've seen this really organic spread out from the cities that we've launched to metro areas, to in some cases even states. And so we're thinking a lot about how to continue that expansion in a thoughtful way, in addition to launching in totally new areas.
We talk a lot on this show about the invisibility of hunger, because I think people walk around. I wish we could all turn purple that have experienced it or are, just for a moment, so people could see how many people it touches. 1 million families they're not a monolith. And what I'm curious, who's showing up and what has surprised you about that?
It is, as you said, any person that walks by you on the street can be somebody who's struggling with food. We have had every type of person, every walk of life on the helpline. We have had substitute teachers who, had employment for most of the year, but when the summer hits, they're out of luck. And that's when they rely on food pantries. And they know it's going to be 3 months of the year. Every year, that's when they need the help. And the rest of the year, they might be okay. It's not a permanent state of being. We have grandparents who may be the primary caretakers of their children, or maybe just charged with watching them after school and providing snacks. But they're on fixed incomes and they don't have enough money to buy fresh fruits with the cost of groceries nowadays. And then all the way on the other side of the spectrum, we have folks who will come into the helpline with a lot of frustration because they had a high-paying career for years. We've had successful lawyers come into the helpline, all sorts of, professionally successful people who, for some reason or another, ended up in this situation. Maybe there was a medical emergency. There's so many factors in life that are outside of our control that can put you in this type of position. And so that's why dignity is such an important value in what we do, to open our arms and say, this is for you. You don't need to question whether you need this or not. If you're thinking about whether you need this, we're here to help you through that process.
Do you have a sense in that number, 1 million, which would make it one of the largest cities in America? Do you have a sense of how many people that you've touched that are children in that number?
Yes, I do think that the majority of our clients tend to be, I would say a slim majority, caregivers of families with children. Again, there's a huge diversity, but a lot of times people are charged with groceries for their entire household.
One stat that I always think about is 1 in 4 kids experience hunger in this country. And if you pause and just sit in that, what you realize is, what are their parents eating? Because I don't know a parent that's going to take the calorie before they give it to the child.
Exactly.
So you really, I remember I went to school hungry and I would just put my head down on a desk. There was no learning happening. you know, and after my free lunch, I could participate in my education. So I think you are touching hundreds of thousands of kids, which is an army of invisible. And I think maybe there's a little more heart space collectively for us to say we should help kids, even though I think we should help everybody with this issue. I think your tools and technology create space for kids like my family.
Yeah. And there's so much evidence linking, a child's upbringing. Food is just one aspect, but a really important aspect, the nutrition associated with it, the mental stability associated with knowing where your next meal is going to come from. That has such an outsized impact on the rest of a child's life. I believe the Gates Foundation did a study recently where they sort of identified different factors in a person's economic mobility, and food insecurity had a 4-point increase on somebody's economic mobility. And that was one of the defined factors out of sort of 10 sort of important things that determines the trajectory of a person's entire life.
Well, one of the things that is so helpful to people who want to use your system is that if they need resources like SNAP benefits or whatever, you can also provide links to that, which is truly essential.
Yes, absolutely. We view kind of the food assistance system as a holistic safety net. Again, if you're struggling with food, you're likely struggling with other things. And while we strive to be specialists in food assistance, we know there's things that other people need. And we know there's a lot of building blocks to kind of get you on that path to stability. And so SNAP is one of the most effective tools for fighting hunger. We all know that. It has an incredible impact on local economies, but it can take a month to get approved, which might not be that bad if you have a month, but a lot of folks don't have a month. They've been struggling with this. And so how can we combine the resources that are available to, again, really make sure that the safety net that should exist for families does?
If someone's listening to this, I think people do feel inspired quite often, but a little lost. You started not knowing what to do. You just became a chat line, and you're too young to remember those. But that was our social interactions back in the day. What can someone do if they're not going to start such a dynamic entity like yours? Can they help your organization? How would you suggest they get involved on this topic in general?
I'm a firm believer that a small act of kindness can change the world. And if everybody engages in one of those acts every day, it does make a difference. And I do think that was something that I thought about every day on those early phone calls of, it wasn't just about the information. It was about hospitality. That's the term that we use at Lemontree to make people feel seen. I used to work in a restaurant and they always tell you, answer the phone with a smile on your face because people can hear it. And I think it's true. And so I always tried to answer the phone with a smile on my face. And I think that makes a big difference for people to know that somebody else is thinking about them. So whatever that is, whether it is volunteering at your local food pantry, just staying aware of all of the cuts and changes that are happening to our social services system, or getting involved with a nonprofit, may it be Lemontree, may it be another nonprofit. I think the bonds that we have in our communities is the most important thing here, because that's what lets you know when your neighbor is struggling. That's what makes them feel comfortable reaching out to you to say, hey, actually, I need some help with this. Do you know any resources? And you might know about Lemontree who can help them. And so making sure those conversations are happening and you're plugged into what's happening in your community, I really think is the best way to make a change right now.
Well, Kasumi, we can say this, that anybody who is interested in volunteering as well as donating, as well as using your services to find free food, should definitely reach out to Lemontree. You may not get Kasumi on her own cell phone this time because now she has a bigger staff, but they are doing tremendous work. And we thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Carol. I really appreciate the opportunity, and David as well. It's such an honor to share about our work. And again, for us, it costs us $3 to connect a household to these resources. And so you can imagine that, again, that $3, that moment of connection can really open up a world for a family in need.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us. Be sure to check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
You can also find more information about our guests, and we have show notes and all of that, and about the podcast and the other events and volunteering that we're doing on our website, theinvisibleamericans.com. Thanks for being with us today. We'll see you the next time.